The last time we saw Devin Sanchez, he decided to sign with the Ohio State Buckeyes. And it was not long into his career before he started saying, "Wang, give me that boy." And it turns out this dude as a freshman was a dog. After earning the #1 cornerback spot for Ohio State, Devin Sanchez had proved that he was the #1 cornerback in the nation. Because it wasn't just the fact that he was getting an interception almost every single game. Because he was definitely out here hitting these boys with a shablaka. Like, dang, bro, he was looking just like Denzel Ward out there. The whole crowd couldn't believe it. But him doing stuff like this is exactly why he went on to win Best Defensive Back as a freshman. Man hauled in 17 receptions in a season where he was able to lead Ohio State to the college football playoffs. Where against Oregon, although he played extremely well, by the end of it he was so sick of the way his team played that he ran off the field as they took the loss, putting an end to Devin Sanchez's freshman season. Which brings us to today, where I'm gonna be honest with y'all, Devin Sanchez did a lot of thinking. He proved himself to be the #1 cornerback in the country, yet the coaches decided to move him back to the 3rd string corner on the team? Yeah, man, Devin Sanchez was not playing that. Especially when the other Devin on the team was booty butt ass cheeks McGee, and he didn't get benched other than when he got injured. So yeah, Devin decided that it was time to hit the transfer portal. And now after receiving a few new offers, he was actually considering going to a school that didn't offer him at all coming out of high school. But based on their quarterback, he felt like it was the right place to go. So for Devin Sanchez's sophomore season, he decided to sign with the Florida Gators. Now, immediately after signing with Florida, they already want Devin to compete for the starting job, because they feel like with having DJ Lagway at quarterback and having some very fast receivers, well, they'll definitely be able to put up some points. But they want to make sure they have somebody out there who can really lead this defense and help lock stuff down on that side of the ball. And Devin Sanchez showed early on that he was going to be that guy. Unfortunately, though, they left this man almost no good numbers, and they left him with number 12. I guess it was all good, though, because 1 + 2 = 3, which was his last number, so we going with it. But now that Devin Sanchez is officially the starting cornerback for the Florida Gators, he's about ready to get into the first game of the season, where it turns out that they will be heading on the road to face off against unranked NC State. Now, to start his career off with the Gators, he is already noticing that this defense is a lot better than Ohio State. He came out here and got a couple stops on 3rd down, including a big overthrow, where Devin Sanchez was celebrating in true DB fashion. Yeah! And by the end of the half, Florida was already up by 2 possessions. And NC State felt like they might be able to get a Hail Mary, but Devin Sanchez was out there saying, "Wang," coming up with his first pick as a Florida Gator to close out the first half. And he went right over to the NC State bench to let them know that he'll be there all day. Oh yeah, because by the 4th quarter, Florida was up by 3 possessions, and Devin Sanchez had this one dude locked away in a county jail. Because when the quarterback tried to throw his way, Devin went out there and said, "Give me that," coming up with his 2nd pick on the night. And this time he was taking it back for a big gain across the 50, and in the process doing enough to give Florida their first win of the season, as the Gators go on to close this game out 27-10. And Devin Sanchez led this defense with 2 interceptions and a few tackles, but he has a feeling that he'll have much better games going forward throughout his season. He still hadn't even come close to reaching his potential in college. So going into his first game of the regular season as a Gator, he was looking forward to showing what he can do in front of the home crowd. And hopefully he can lead Florida to another win as they're set to face off against California. Now, one thing about Devin is that he was definitely not perfect, and neither was his defense. They actually got ran all over throughout this opening drive, and California actually went on to score a touchdown to temporarily tie this game up. Soon, though, this defense was able to tighten up as they came up with a couple stops. But a determined California offense continued to drive down the field, and although the plays weren't to his side, this Devin Sanchez-led defense would let up another touchdown. In the second half, though, led by Devin Sanchez, this defense was able to give Florida a great cushion as he was out there making plays left and right. And by the end of this one, it came down to a 4th down and 10. Where at this point, California was pretty much playing for pride. So for the first time all game, they decide to throw Devin Sanchez's way, and it clearly does not work out, as he comes up with a pick to close out this California drive and put an end to this game, as Florida comes up with a 31-22 victory. And thanks to DJ Lagway on offense and another great performance from this defense, Florida is starting their season at 2-0 before they head into a game against the top 5 ranked UAB. 82 overall UAB, huh? Now, Florida definitely felt pretty slighted that they were unranked, but this team was. But Devin Sanchez did not care, because at least his team was undefeated still, unlike his old one. So now going on the road against the top 5 ranked team, the Florida Gators knew that if they ever want to make the top 25, they'll have to come away with an upset against the University of Alabama Birmingham. Now, early on in this game, this defense was absolutely dominating. They were out here coming up with stops in the backfield. Devin Sanchez was out here saying, "Wang." He had this one return where he was able to turn around and flip the field completely. He was running towards the end zone, but ended up getting pushed out at the 1-yard line. And this Florida defense just had a whole lot of momentum going forward. Because although UAB was coming up with some pretty big plays, even making a reception where they got down to the goal line, it didn't really seem to matter as Devin Sanchez would snag the ball at the air, coming up with a pick on his own 1-yard line and taking some points off the board for UAB. They would eventually get the ball back though. But for whatever reason, it seems like they didn't learn their lesson though. God dang. Devin Sanchez has 3 interceptions through the first half alone. And this last one put him at 20 picks throughout his career already. Unfortunately though, the offense would turn the ball over again, and UAB would get a field goal at the end of half to cut the Florida lead. Now in the second half, Devin Sanchez was doing his best as he helped his team come up with multiple stops. But by the end of this game, with less than 10 seconds left, it actually turns out to be a play where Devin Sanchez would leave his man open for a touchdown that unfortunately would allow UAB to get back in this game with a 2-point conversion that sends it to overtime. And on this play, Devin thought he was about to make a big hit, but instead the receiver hits him with a hey, and pretty much had Devin Sanchez looking goofy as hell, man. He scored a touchdown that could put an end to this game. But it turns out that Devin Sanchez has other plans, because he was absolutely not trying to go out like that. So on this play where Florida now actually had the lead, Devin dropped back into coverage and he said, "Wang!" Coming up with a pick, and he didn't even got a return. He's just doing this for fun. But he gets a turnover that closes the game out against the top 5 ranked team and gives the Gators another win on their season, as Florida comes up with a 30-24 victory in overtime. And for the first time all season, Devin Sanchez wins player of the game with 4 picks. But it wasn't just that, man. He had a tackle for loss, a pass deflection, he had 6 tackles. This dude was all over the place. And it was exactly why he won SEC and National Defensive Player of the Week, reminding the entire country that he was, in fact, the best defensive back in college football. But if there were people who didn't believe him, he was going to have a chance to prove it again the following week, as Florida was going to have another game back at home, but this time against another top 25 ranked opponent. As in week 4, the Florida Gators are set to face off against the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, in a game where the Gators were a heavy underdog, early on, it looks like Devin Sanchez better make some people a lot of money. It got so bad that Oklahoma was trying to get the refs to call cheap-ass flags on Devin, because not one of the receivers that came his way were able to get open. And even on plays where they thought they were going to be open, Devin Sanchez will be out there saying, "No!" Coming up with his first real pick of the day, and it looks like he better take this back for his first touchdown of the season. Oh no, this dude Devin Sanchez was different. That was too bad that the rest of his defense was also different in a different kind of way, as they let up a lot of yards in this game. Shoot, that didn't really seem to matter to Devin Sanchez, because backed up on his own goal line, he got another pick. Lurking this pass deep in his own territory, and out of nowhere, he is gone. It doesn't look like a single person for Oklahoma can catch him, as Devin Sanchez is taking this ball all the way down the sideline and across the goal line for a touchdown. His second one of the day, and he honestly can't even believe that he's doing it against one of the top 25 ranked teams in the country. Because just like that, Devin Sanchez had already done enough to put this game away, as Florida would go on to close this game out 24-14. And Devin Sanchez wins player of the game with 2 pick sixes. And this dude Devin Sanchez was so different, it was becoming national news that he was a dog. I mean, they had to let everybody know just in case they hadn't seen it. Now, Devin went on to win another player of the week, which was cool, but it was not cool that Florida was still unranked. But it was all good though, as Devin was actually working on hitting his top speed, and he had a feeling that going forward throughout the season, he was going to help this defense lock up everything. And hopefully he can help his team come away with wins, especially against SEC opponents, like the one in their next game against Missouri. Now, this game from the very start seemed to be very strange to Devin, because for the first time all season, his offense was struggling to put up points, and eventually the defense would show signs of struggle as well, as they let up a touchdown and go down 7-0 in this game. Now, everything seemed to be okay, as Devin Sanchez was doing a great job at mitigating yards when plays came his way. It almost seemed like he was one of the only guys on the whole team who showed up, because by the second half, the Gators were still down. And on this 3rd down and 10, Missouri felt like they had Devin Sanchez beat, so they were going to test him. But that turned out to be a stupid idea, as Devin Sanchez comes down with a pick in stride on his receiver, making a play that gives his team some life, and turns out to also be his 10th interception on the season already. But by the end of this game, with Florida's offense just not doing what it needs to, the defense would find themselves in a bad position where they allowed Missouri into field goal range, and unfortunately Florida would take their first loss of the season, falling to Missouri 13-10. And Devin felt pretty sick about this game because he knew that he did what he had to do. But at this point, he knows it's going to be a lot harder for his team to get into the top 25, especially when they had games like the ones that were coming up on their schedule. Because the Gators are heading into a stretch where they're about to play against a few top 25 ranked teams, including their next one on the road against one of the top ranked teams in the country, the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, for the first time all season, this turned out to be a game where Devin Sanchez was not having to do much early on, as his defense came up with a pick 6 to put them up 7 in the first quarter. But these Alabama referees were definitely cheating in this game. They called a penalty on Devin Sanchez for just trying to get off a block. Like, I'm sorry, I didn't know that was illegal contact. Yeah, it turns out that ball does not lie though, as Florida now had a 14-point lead before they came up with another pick that was going to the crib for another touchdown. Now, Devin Sanchez did have an impact on this game as he was coming up with a few tackles, but he definitely appreciates how much the rest of his defense dominated. And by the end of the third quarter, they had already done enough to put an end to this game, as Florida goes on to blow out Alabama on the road 28-0. But despite being 5-1 and having beaten multiple top 25 ranked teams, the Florida Gators were still unranked. But that seemed to be okay because all that did was just motivate this Florida team. And they were prepared to go throughout the rest of the season proving to everybody that they were more than just a top 25 team, starting in their next game against Vanderbilt. Now, one game after Devin Sanchez had let the rest of his defense take over, he knew that any chance he got, he was going to come out here and say, "Mwang," as he came up with a diving pick early on in the back of the end zone, and just like that, he's already setting the tone for the rest of his team. But in another game where the offense was struggling, led by Devin Sanchez, this defense had no problem. And unfortunately for Vanderbilt, they are seriously struggling to put up some points in this game. And it turns out that it wasn't just because of Devin Sanchez, because another defensive back would also come up with an interception, as Cornerback McClain actually hauls in this pick, and he's able to take it all the way back to the crib for a score, putting up points that does enough to put this game away, as Florida comes out with another victory thanks to another Devin Sanchez-led performance. And at this point in the season, Florida is finally ranked, which a lot of Florida fans were excited about. But they were also excited about the fact that Devin Sanchez was now the single-season interception leader, breaking a Florida record already with 5 games left in the season. But at the moment, Devin Sanchez wasn't worried about breaking no records, because now that they are finally ranked, he's just trying to help his team win as many games as possible. Because after a bad end to his freshman season at Ohio State, he truly believes that the Florida Gators have everything it takes to make a deep playoff run. But he knows that he and his team have to prove that they deserve to get there first. Now, throughout the season, teams have rarely thrown Devin Sanchez's way, but when they do, he is often coming up with a pick. And this game against South Carolina was no different, because by the end of this one, it was already 28-14, and I know South Carolina's trying to come back, but Devin Sanchez is not having that, coming up with his 3rd or 4th pick in the season in his own end zone, taking points off the board for South Carolina and pretty much putting this game away. But props to them, they get the ball back and they are trying to go for it on 4th down. For some reason, though, they decide to throw back to Devin Sanchez, and he makes them pay. I mean, I don't know what the hell they were thinking, man. He came up with 2 picks in the last minute and a half of the game. And this one here would be enough to give Florida another victory on the season, as they close this game out 28-14 thanks to a big game from DJ Lagway. And that's the kind of thing that Devin Sanchez likes to see, man, because he knows that he's going to do what he has to do on defense. And he genuinely feels like if both sides of the ball can keep this level of play up, then he doesn't care who or where they play, there isn't a single team in the country who can beat them. Not even on the road against the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, going into this one, it was a very highly anticipated matchup, but early on it became very clear who was going to pull ahead early in this game, because all throughout the first half, Georgia was actually shooting themselves in the foot, and it actually took the Bulldogs all the way until the 4th quarter to get down to the goal line, where they eventually did come up with a touchdown to bring them back in this game. But by the end of this one, even after getting themselves into field goal range, it turns out that their kicker would miss and Florida would take the 10-7 victory on the road. And this was a game where Georgia didn't even bother to throw Devin Sanchez's way, but he did come up with a few tackles though. But regardless, after beating the last remaining ranked team on their schedule, the Gators felt extremely good going back into another game at home against Arkansas. Now, early on, this was another game where Devin Sanchez was not having to do much, as his teammate comes up with a pick to set the tone for the Gators. Devin did have an impact later on though, as he helped force a fumble on this guy, and the Gators would pick it up, causing a turnover and allowing the team to take a 2-possession lead going into the 4th quarter. Where after Florida comes up with another interception from Cornerback McClain, they were picking up another win against an SEC opponent, as they win this one 27-14, and at this point the Florida Gators are looking like an absolute powerhouse. Even in games like their next one against Auburn, where their offense had struggled greatly throughout the entire game, their defense had remained key to the team's success, as by the end of this one it was literally 7-0, and despite letting up over 200 yards passing, the Gators had come up with a shutout at home against the Tigers, which eventually would lead us into the last game of the regular season, where all Florida had to do was just close out the season against an in-state rival, the Florida State Seminoles. Now, over the past few weeks, Devin Sanchez hadn't made a huge impact on defense, but to start this game, he was, as he came up with an interception early on that turned out to be his 30th pick of his career. This kid wasn't even 20 years old yet, and he was proving to be one of the best cornerbacks in all of college football history. But it was not just because he was out there catching interceptions. Devin Sanchez was very physical, and he was definitely willing to say shablock him, as he forces a fumble, and his defense comes up with another big turnover, which should give his team a lot of momentum, but unfortunately the offense is not performing well. I mean, they hadn't even been past midfield yet. So Devin Sanchez actually came up with the idea to say "Wang" and come up with a pick in Florida State territory, allowing his offense to have a ton of momentum going forward. Because now by the fourth quarter, it is 13-0. But with Florida State believing they still have a chance to come back in this game, they decide to throw to Devin Sanchez's side, and it gets tipped and picked off by Devin Sanchez, coming up with a turnover that puts an end to this game, but finally puts an end to the regular season, as the Gators close the season out with a 13-0 victory, shutting out back-to-back opponents largely thanks to a Devin Sanchez masterclass. Dude had 3 interceptions and a forced fumble, so it was no surprise to anybody that he would go on to win National Defensive Player of the Week, closing the season out with more proof that he was the best defensive player in the country. But he would have one more game to prove it, as he was set to match up against Texas in the SEC championship game. So Devin worked as hard as he always had to prepare, because he knew that this might be the biggest game of his career. He had a chance to lead another team back to the college football playoffs, but this time with a first-round bye. And he knew that the way that he, DJ Lagway, and the rest of the Florida Gators had been playing, that they had a great chance against Arch Manning and the Texas Longhorns. Now, early on in this game, both teams were struggling on offense, but after Florida was eventually able to come up with a stop in the red zone, Texas put up the first points of the game with a field goal. But with the Florida offense not playing as well as they had been lately, Devin knew that he had to help him out and make a play. So on this one, he baited Arch Manning before snagging his ball out the air, coming up with an interception, and then he immediately reverses field for a huge gain that goes deep into Longhorn territory. And it becomes very clear to the entire stadium what kind of game this might be, as this Gator defense led by Devin Sanchez continued to make plays, ultimately holding Texas to another field goal to close out the first half. But eventually things would begin to change a little bit, as for the first time in a while, Devin Sanchez was getting cooked. Like I'm talking about some shrimp fried rice, boy. He let up a touchdown that allowed Texas to take the lead. But by the end of this game, with less than 2 minutes left, Florida would take the lead back. Unfortunately, though, Texas was driving downfield looking to send this game into overtime. On the second down to 10, though, I think Devin Sanchez realized that he don't want to play in overtime. He wants to find a way to put an end to this game right now. So on this play, he sees the running back motion out, and oh yeah, he know what time it is. Devin Sanchez runs right up to him and says, "Shablang, boy, what's up, boy?" Devin Sanchez just knocked this dude the fuck out, and then immediately picks up the ball, not only securing the win for Florida, but Devin Sanchez finally does enough to get another team back to the college football playoffs, as the Gators close this game out 17-14. And once again, it was definitely led by Devin Sanchez, who made plays all throughout the game, helping Florida win their first SEC championship since 2008. And this is in a year where Devin Sanchez has 19 interceptions before the playoffs start. And I don't even know if Devin himself realized just how great he had been. He set a national single-season record for the most interceptions in a year. But that was nothing compared to the fact that he was now the all-time career leader in interceptions. And at this point, it is widely accepted that he is one of the best defensive players in the history of college football. And it was no surprise to anybody that his head coach and defensive coordinator would get a lot of credit after the season. But there were definitely people who were upset that Devin Sanchez did not win the Heisman, as it went to Dante Moore out of Oregon, who definitely had a pretty good season. But Devin Sanchez, who wins back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year awards, well, he just had a better year. So it especially didn't make sense to anybody that he wasn't even in the running for Heisman. They even had Decorian Moore's replacement up there since he had taken the year off before the draft. And Devin didn't really mind that because he knows that defensive players don't often win the Heisman. But he was not happy to find out that he wasn't selected to be an All-American in any capacity, not even within his own conference. So at this point, Devin was extra motivated to work even harder going into the playoffs. He definitely felt a little bit slighted and realized that he deserved a lot more credit for the season than he got. So he's just extra locked in now going into the college football playoffs, because he wants to help the Gators come away with their first ever playoff win. But in order to do that, he's going to have to help the Gators take down fake-ass Patrick Mahomes and Nebraska. Now in this game against fake-ass Patrick Mahomes, Devin Sanchez was not having to do much, because after already throwing one pick to the defense, it turns out that fake-ass Patrick Mahomes was very generous, as he throws another one in the second quarter to put an end to their drive and allow Florida to take a 2-possession lead. But if that wasn't already enough, fake-ass Patrick Mahomes was throwing his third pick of the quarter. And at this point, it was clear that Florida had a ton of momentum going into the second half. Nebraska did not get too far past midfield until the end of the third quarter, where eventually they would come up with a touchdown. But by then, it seems like Florida had already done enough to put this game away, as Florida was coming up with a victory in the playoffs, and this was actually thanks to another defensive player on the team. Devin Sanchez did do a great job in the tackling department, as he was now helping the Gators get to the next round of the playoffs, where it turns out in their next one the entire state of Florida was going to be watching, because it turns out that two of the best teams in the state were about to match up, as the Florida Gators were set to face off against the Miami Hurricanes. Now this was another game early on where Devin Sanchez was not having to do much for his defense, but towards the end of the first half he realized that maybe he relied on them too much, as he was once again getting cooked for a long play downfield that goes for a touchdown, allowing Miami to tie this game up going into the second half. But Devin Sanchez did not come this far to let his team down. So the very next time his team comes out on defense, Devin Sanchez goes up to this dude and says, "Shablaka," just smacking the dog shit out of him, and just like that, Florida picks it up. And it looked like the Gators were going to get a ton of momentum going forward. Unfortunately, though, that would not be the case, as by the fourth quarter, with Devin Sanchez still feeling like he had to make up for the play earlier, well, he ended up not only going offsides, but he left his man wide open and allowed Miami to go in for another touchdown to take the lead. So now all of a sudden things were not looking good for Florida, but they would end up tying this game back up. And by the fourth quarter, Devin Sanchez was out there helping his team come up with a stop in the backfield, ultimately sending this game into overtime, where even though Devin was playing great defense, Florida would still let up a touchdown, and it looked like the momentum was on the Hurricanes' side. Eventually, though, this game would come down to this 2-point conversion, where Miami actually had a chance to keep this game going, but they hand the ball off to their running back, and he gets stopped short, and just like that, the Florida Gators go on to win this game. I mean, that all happened so fast they couldn't even process the fact that they were now heading to the national championship, which is somewhere this team hadn't been since they had Tim Tebow at quarterback. But this is exactly what Devin Sanchez always wanted. He came into college with the mindset that he would one day want to win a national championship. And now, after transferring to the Florida Gators, he might now finally have a chance to do so. But he would be doing this against the quarterback who not only stole his Heisman Trophy, but against the team that had knocked his team out in the previous season. As in the national championship, the Florida Gators will be set to face off against the Oregon Ducks. Now, early on in this game, Devin Sanchez was feeling different. He was still very upset that this team had knocked him out of the playoffs as a freshman. So on this opening drive, Devin Sanchez made sure to read this route, and he ended up saying, "Wang!" Coming up with a diving interception on Dante Moore. But he's out there letting the entire crowd know that he is nowhere near done yet. Because in this game, man, his defense was coming out to play. They were out there coming up with multiple stops, even though their offense wasn't putting up any points. So at some point, Devin Sanchez realized that he might have to change that. So on 2nd and 13, Devin Sanchez sees the receiver break to the outside before he says, "Gimme that!" Coming up with another interception, and just like that, Devin Sanchez is racing down the sideline. And there is nobody who's going to catch him as he scores the first touchdown of the game for either team. And I don't know if y'all see that, but that man Petty, he doing a Heisman pose right behind Dante Moore. Yeah, by the way, I don't know what's going on here, man. These two freaky as hell, boy. What the hell? But coming back on the defense, it looks like Devin Sanchez had motivated his squad, as they not only force a fumble, but they come up with a turnover to give Florida a ton of momentum, ultimately allowing the offense to put up a touchdown before and after half. Now taking the 21-0 lead going into the third quarter, where even still, Dante Moore is not looking like a Heisman Trophy winner, now throwing his 4th pick of the game. And to a lot of people, this game was already pretty much over. But with around 2 minutes left, Oregon did still have life. And they actually had a play where the receiver had cooked Devin Sanchez and made a reception over the middle as he head towards the end zone. But nah, see, Devin Sanchez wasn't going to have that. So he stayed right behind him before raising his fist up and saying, "Wang!" Oh! That boy Devin Sanchez knocked that shit out, and Florida recovers. Not only doing enough to put an end to this drive, but allowing the Florida Gators to go on to win the national championship. They have finally done it. Devin Sanchez just helped lead the Gators to their first championship ring in almost 20 years, doing it all while taking down a fake-ass Heisman Trophy winner and the team that put an end to his freshman season. And of course, Devin Sanchez would go on to win Player of the Game. But the most important thing to him was that now he was officially a national champion. And after an incredible sophomore season with the Gators, people were able to look back and see that Devin Sanchez maybe had one of, if not the best defensive season in all of college football history, as he ended this season with 21 interceptions, averaging more than 1 pick a game on his way to leading his team to a championship ring. But after finishing his sophomore season, Devin Sanchez just can't wait to play out his 3rd year and head to the NFL. And if you want to see Devin Sanchez in the NFL, be sure to get this video to 1,000 likes and subscribe to the channel down below. Also be sure to comment down below what else you guys want to see next, and YouTube thinks you'll like one of these other stories until the next one comes out. If you got to this point in the video, just know that I appreciate you more than you'll ever know. If you're hearing this, I hope you have an incredible rest of your week. And other than that, I'm going to catch you guys next time.